Morning. We have a special guest today on Medicine with the Metal because Michelle is not joining us today as we're in beautiful Costa Rica making a little adventure move. This morning we have Shiri Godasi. Good morning, Shiri.
Pura vida, Mark.
Pura vida, my friend.
Thanks so much for having me, fellow Costa Rican neighbor.
How are you today? Can you go ahead and introduce yourself?
So I'm Shiri. Yeah, I've been involved in the psychedelic space for about a decade now. I serve in many different roles. I would say primarily I'm a student of consciousness first and foremost, and a mother. And beyond that, I've worked a lot in the realms of harm reduction, creating ecosystems and structures to help people have safer and deeper journeys, and helping them specifically with the integration bit. But I really see the whole harm reduction philosophy as psychedelic integration, and that's been my forte for about a decade now. So I'm a shamanic psychedelic therapist and community builder. I work one-on-one with individuals and also teach in my coaching certification school that I created a few years back, and enjoying life on the beach.
Well, let's go and dive right into this conversation because it's our biggest what we like to promote the most to people when you jump into psychedelics. It's just not let's go have an adventure and come out and let's go relive our life. Let's go have an adventure when let's integrate our life of what we just learned through this process. You being on this path for about 10 years now, me being on this for about seven, my wife about seven, I think we all have gone through this learning phase in the beginning of psychedelics because, I think a lot of people aren't really that we've heard about psychedelics, they know about psychedelics, but the fear still surrounds around psychedelics. And for us, this is what we want to eliminate. We want to get this stigma away. And we think this is a beautiful way to find yourself, a beautiful way to heal. But first and foremost, I think integration is the most important part about a psychedelic journey. So let's dive into first what got you started on this path? How did you find it? And then what brought you to do the next step? Let's start off with there.
Yeah, thanks. So as most of people that serve in this field, I stepped into this path because I myself was um, communicating and engaging with psychedelic plant medicines and synthetic psychedelic compounds, and found myself really drawn to this world and wanting to be of service in this world. And I heard the word integration for the first time when I attended a very small grassroots plant medicine conference in Los Angeles called Plant Teachers, and from the mouth of Dr. Susanna Bustos, was affiliated with CIIS. And I remember sitting in the audience and hearing that word for the first time, and it made so much sense to me, understanding that the embodiment of the insights and the supportive structures around what we call the peak experience that plant medicines and psychedelics can provide. So it's the context in which this peak experience is formed that really is what needs to be taken into consideration for the embodiment of the wisdom of the experience. And when I say the context, the structure, the ecosystem, for me, integration starts from the moment that the idea to partake in ceremony is planted. That seed of an idea is planted in our conscious mind. So that's for me when
Of course.
integration begins. And so I got into this path because I was myself, again, as mentioned, engaging with psychedelics, and just didn't have that support system, didn't have the structure, didn't have that ecosystem, didn't not have the community, and something clicked again when hearing that word for the first time. And
Hmm.
I just knew at that moment, I literally took my notebook and I wrote the word integration and circled it at the top of my notepad. I was like, this is my zone. And just everything just was like had just a domino effect from that moment. So that's how I got started. And I think for like a lot of people in this field that just have been inspired and helped by and have grown so much from this engagement and just wanting to support others on the path. Right now we know that we are going through a very transformative opportunity and period on the planet. and a lot of people are have a lot of questions about life and about their purpose and what does all this mean, and they're looking for answers. And when a student seeks, then the teachers arrive. And maybe the teachers also have always been there, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when the student is more open to receiving, then everything just everything happens.
And because you say I mentioned a couple important things, community. Community is something that I think, I like to talk beginning of the stages when people first enter this path because it's really confusing, First ayahuasca experience, somebody comes off that, it can be very confusing for a lot of people, life changing. But if you don't know how to navigate that, man, it was just tough. And my biggest thing, like yours, like when I first did my psychedelic experience, my big ayahuasca experience maybe 7 years ago in a church in Florida, I got out of that church and a couple times of sitting with that medicine, all these people kept leaving. And I kept saying to myself, man, you're feeding these people to the wolves. They're not learning nothing. They're going out there and just going and doing the same thing. So that's how I picked up that integration, and that integration just started becoming a daily practice, working with others and just seeing others and how I can go and transform myself by looking inside of myself and not outside. And that community was also such a big part of it because people, they understood, not fully, but they understood a little bit what I was going through. So, very important aspects right there, community and integration, very much so. Because, let me ask you this. When we come off, say, a first ayahuasca journey, say somebody sits with that medicine 2, 3 times over the weekend and they go home, what do you recommend to them the first thing they do?
What I would recommend to any person that's feeling drawn to sit with ayahuasca is to begin preparing from the moment that they think about signing up for ceremony. And what I mean by that is don't wait for until after the ceremony ends to start planning of what your integration process would look like. As mentioned, integration begins when we begin thinking about, again, participating in ceremony. The idea, it goes from an idea to a real tangible thing. So we begin thinking and doing the research. Okay, where would be the best place for me to sit? What do I need to do to get there? How much time do I need to be able to sit with the insights afterwards for just recovery, not even processing quite yet? So all these things, the planning and, what to take to the ceremony, during that time already is an opportune time to begin the dialogue with any medicine, but specifically since you asked about ayahuasca, we know that ayahuasca, particularly that plant medicine, has a very specific technology, an ancient technology, where that dialogue, that relationship begins and is deepened through the preliminary dieta, the prerequisite dieta, where we begin eliminating certain foods, certain practices like media, like sexual conduct, any type of distraction that can penetrate our energetic field, and we begin cleansing that and clearing that from our system. So the deeper we get into the dialogue and that relationship with that particular brew, that particular spirit of ayahuasca beforehand, then the more prepared that we arrive to sit in ceremony, the safer the experience will be, the deeper it will be, the more seamless it will be. And then in the aftermath of it, once the ceremony is done, the facilitators seal the ceremony, and then you step out of the Maloka, the church, the home in the Hollywood Hills, all the places where ayahuasca is served right now, okay? The moment that you take your first
Hmm.
step, this is a moment to understand or to just accept that now is the moment where I have an opportunity to begin walking the wisdom that was gained in ceremony. And that walk, it can be confusing. And again, I think the word integration right now is like, it's very hyped, but also sorely misunderstood. Sorely misunderstood. A
Sorely.
lot of people attribute, okay, start
Hmm.
journaling, start, doing yoga, do breath work, and that's how you integrate. But the truth is that it's really,
Hmm.
the way that I see it, it's more of first of all, integration, the post-ceremonial integration stage has two stages. So I look at like the first few days as the recovery stage, and that's the immediate integration stage. And then the long-term integration stage, which I would say, depending on the medicine, depending on the how deep the experience was, how maybe challenging the experience was, then I would say typically, but maybe at 48 hours, sometimes a couple of weeks later, once the recovery stage is done, that's when we step into the long-term phase.
That's interesting. I never really quite heard that. Let's
Mm-hmm.
go back over that again. A recovery phase, because definitely that's a great word to use because that's what you're doing in a little bit, maybe that 2, 3 week time period, maybe less for some people, but you are actually recovering from something. And that's a really good way to put it because you're very vulnerable during that first couple weeks after
Mm-hmm.
any ceremony experience. Let it be Cambo, that's not psychedelic. Let it be ayahuasca, 5-MeO. Let's talk about any of these plants, but you can also get these experiences through meditation. But that little week there, that little few weeks is really, really detrimental and important. So I like the way you put that.
And it's really, yeah, thanks,
Very
Mark. And
cool.
then, I want to put an emphasis on that. The way that I see it, one way to look at it is I see the recovery stages, the off ramp, right, from the peak experience, right? So this is the descent stage from,
Hmm.
okay, once we went flying, now we're coming down and we're on the
Hmm.
runway rolling back to a halt. And
Mm.
basically, that recovery
Mm.
stage is going to include more physical, nurturing practices, emotional nurturing practices, rest, hydration, eating wholesome foods. Again, still keeping away from social media, keeping away from people who can or are not familiar with this modality or not respective of this modality, just keeping being in stillness as much as possible, regaining the levels in the neurochemistry, balanced neurochemistry, and then in that phase, what I would really recommend on and to do, as far as your question, okay, what's the first thing people do? So first of all, create that
Mm.
off ramp for yourself, and then within that period, I do recommend to what I call to do kind of like a stream of consciousness brain dump into I don't like that word, but just like, yeah, basically like you want to
It's okay.
purge whatever memories or insights that you felt or saw or sensed or tapped into in ceremony. Just put it all either in I like to voice record or put it in a notebook, but don't yet try to understand what it means. Don't write any essays. Don't try to put it in any type of linear story, because as soon as you fashion a story, then you're putting your own limitations
Absolutely.
on it, right? So just put it all in a
Hmm.
notebook. You'll get back to it later and then focus solely on recovery. And then when it's time to move further to processing and move into the long-term integration stage, then you will know when to do that. And that's a whole different strategy. But that's as far as what to do
Mm.
immediately after a ceremony.
Yeah, that's a pretty cool way to look at it, because that first, like I say, that first couple weeks is so vulnerable after any medical medicine experience because, I don't think you'll ever forget, but, we tend to not remember, so we go back to our old habits or our old ways because, we always try to find happiness through habits. And we can never do that. It will never happen because as soon as we get older and older and older, all those habits that we've infiltrated are always bad habits. So what's really good? So sitting in that fresh new space and, it's so difficult, especially in the beginning. You're like, so many things are going on. What's good? What's real? What was not? And that's a great thing. A lot of people want to journal. They want to create their own new story. Man, let things just flow, especially for that first year or so. Let things flow. And I just don't know if anything's more important than that. Just let it flow. And whatever you do is going to be, I guess. It all comes together after a while. But, all this dogma about um, writing notes and putting things in here, I think you do. I think you nailed it I think we start creating our own story when we do that. And I think, we got to notate something. We got to put something down. But, letting things flow in the beginning, I think is a so important message. Very important.
And also, I do feel that there has to be very specific mindfulness around it, right? So like you put it as, okay, letting things flow, where I see it as I'm completely seeing this, even this initial period, as part of the strategy,
Hmm.
because I know that when I dedicate time, again, specifically for recovery, emotional, physical,
Hmm.
spiritual, neurochemical recovery, then I'm freeing myself
Hmm.
from the potential emotional burden and the psychological burden of needing to make decisions, needing to get into action where it's not the season for that quite yet. My energetic reserves are not quite there yet. So it'll be kind of muddling the effect and removing me from the experience. Where what my aim is really to create more order around it. So actually, when it is time to get to the action phase, the more masculine phase of the long term. Okay, now we process these insights, we understand what they mean, we go through the trauma work, then that is much cleaner and then also goes by much faster. But in that initial phase, that the whole idea of mindfulness, you really want to think about, there are some insights that I would definitely recommend, like the bigger insights, take at least a month before you make huge decisions, like, leaving a relationship, leaving that job, going on a plant diet, moving to the jungle. Wait for at least a month before you take action, because these insights, sometimes, there is a massive amplification in the ceremony, but then when you land back and again fully recovered, we suddenly see how deeply connected it is to other parts in life and the impact that these decisions would make on our lives and our own ecosystem. And then things look different, right? So I would really recommend to hold off on taking action on the bigger insights. However, if you received insights that, okay, it will be in your best interest to quit eating sugar because you see how poisonous to the body, to stop with tobacco, to start walking more in nature for whatever reason, then those are definitely the practices that I would recommend. Yes, immediately, whatever insights or wisdom or sense that you have about increasing your wellness and daily habits, definitely begin practicing that, because
Hmm.
that will create that new pattern, that new groove in your mind to build that new habit. So you really want to leverage that, right? So again, there's a
Yeah.
difference between like
Yeah.
better habits to life-changing insights, meaning like breakthrough
Mm.
life-changing insights, breakthrough level, because even the habits are going
Absolutely.
to obviously change your
And
life, right? Yeah.
absolutely, for sure. You mentioned a couple things
Mhm.
a few times too, and I really, I'm a firm believer of a lot of this food. Our food, and food, especially in these states, is just like food is such an important part of our chemistry, how we think, how our thought process. Our food in America is poisoned, and I think you've said this a few times since just in our little short 15-minute conversation. You've mentioned food a few times, and the importance of food and what we put in our body. Like I really didn't understand that really on this path until about 3 years ago. And then it's just so important. I mean, the way we eat, and you don't have to be so conscious about it all, but we just, and especially in the States, our unhealthy eating habits they take a toll on us mentally. I mean, they really do, because that physical toll is no matter what, that physical and mental are always part of one. So just want to make that apparent, or make that out there to people how important our daily food habits are, because they really are.
And a big
Big
part
part
of
of integration
one
too.
of one thing that you're saying that is really true for me, like, as far as like the way that I understand integration, and that again, I feel like it's potentially misunderstood, is that people like put a lot of weight on, okay, what do the insights means? How can I cultivate and make the visions bigger? And again, integrate them into my daily life, whatever that means, right? And or I
Yeah.
want to heal my trauma by taking this vision that I saw and taking action on that. Whereas, a person that is depressed, has anxiety, stress, trauma, all these mental health issues, and just is living an imbalanced life with a mental dis-ease, the first thing that I would ask them before they step into ceremony is how are you sleeping, how are you eating, and how are you moving? And I will say, after like years of being in the fields, I've sat and I can't even count how many ceremonies, definitely in the three digits. I've supported thousands of clients. And if I had to choose the three most basic integration, quote unquote, practices before you sit in ceremony, if you want to improve your mental health, your daily life, bringing more balance into your life, before you step into ayahuasca, work on your sleep, nutrition, and your movement. Without these three
Wow.
things, no visions are going to help. No medicine will help. I mean, they
Nope,
will,
nope. Mm-mm.
they're not gonna, you're not gonna leverage the value that they can bring into your life if you don't have these three basic things dialed down.
And those are the three tools. They really are. Those are the three components that really can bless you. I mean, and it's really simple, you know. I mean, like I said, our food in the States is poison. And I mean, you come to places like Costa Rica and you just see the difference in how we eat. And, you know, most Americans would say, oh, God, I can't eat that. Are you kidding me? It's just, it's unbelievable what we put in our body in the States. So I'm glad we touched on that. So let's do touch on trauma because trauma is, I think, a big part of why people come to this medicine, don't you?
For sure. And, I would even go further than that to say that even people that don't step into this work for healing trauma, they end up discovering how deeply informed they are by trauma as a whole. What is trauma really? Let's define that. So trauma is an event
Yep.
that was an event that was subjectively experienced by a person as an event that where this person's sovereignty was violated, right? So whether it's their
Hmm.
emotional sovereignty, their psychological sovereignty, their physical sovereignty has been violated, and it's the way that the person experienced it. And this is key because for some people they would go through a very similar event and they will not experience it as a
Hmm.
traumatic event. Okay, so
So
whatever is
true.
real for this
Hmm.
person and the way they experienced it, this is how trauma will be formed in their psyche. And then, of course, there are many. We can get into like hours long conversations about how trauma manifests in the body and in the mental state, and of course in daily life. But to focus on our topic, because we live in a world that is literally built upon trauma. Our leaders have had trauma. There's war in the world. There's famine. There's shortage of resources. So even if we believe that we ourselves did not directly experience a traumatic experience, right? Which most people believe that okay, traumatic experience again can be an accident, a loss, something big and detrimental like that. But the truth is that trauma can show up in many ways. A lot of the psychological trauma that people hold is very directly related to early childhood development, where a traumatic experience can be an ongoing and nuanced relationship between a caregiver and a child, where the child did not have their very specific needs met in a very certain way. And then because it's a chronic,
Hmm.
ongoing, year-long relationship, then the trauma response builds in the body. So relational trauma is a big thing. And then even if again you don't believe that you have that, a lot of people step into ceremony and actually discover that, well, maybe I didn't have it but my neighbor has it. I live in a society that is programmed on that. Our leaders have that. My community is. Again, there is war, there's all these things, and literally there's collective trauma that I
Hmm.
feel like in specifically our generation, people that were born like in this 70s, 80s, definitely
Hmm.
not. I think our parents' generation, they suffered a lot of trauma, but they didn't have the
Of
tools to
course.
deal with it or the
Express
language,
it.
right? But we
Hmm.
do, right? And we're basically like the first generation that is beginning to bring voice to all of that and allow more healing. Uh,
Hmm.
and we're aware that trauma can basically show up in different ways. So what I'm suggesting is that even if a person that does not believe that they have trauma, there is a very high likelihood that they will face some type of a traumatic energy event, a situation that will evoke that understanding of what trauma is, to see how actually we all share in trauma as a built-in foundational part of the human experience.
I mean, you cannot minimize somebody's trauma. You just can't. I don't, you know, like me and my wife always say, like, what's trauma? Like, and you just nailed it again. You said, like, when you're younger and something, say if you stub your toe and 10 people laugh at you, that could be trauma. But the same trauma of, say, a child getting molested by their parents is trauma to some people. But, you know, all in all, it's the same trauma. It affects, it violates something of your inner child. You know, it's violating that. And I think, I feel on this path of how we integrate this is we have to go back and visit those childhood traumas to relive those childhood traumas, to expose them and to relieve them. Because if we don't, they're going to sit there. And people come to this medicine, like you say, and they don't realize they have traumas, but then they discover them, and you got to dig. You got to dig deep because sometimes you forget and you bury them. And those are the worst ones, the ones that are buried. And sometimes they never come up. Sometimes they never will. But holding on to these traumas, and everybody's trauma is different. It's pretty, you just can't judge other people's traumas. You can't.
Yeah, and I think it's important also to remember, and this is where, we want to talk about integration in the context, again, of psychedelic support, right? So oftentimes people will say, well, I don't need an integration therapist, coach, specialist because the medicine is going to teach me everything I know. And while I have very deep respect for, again, the wisdom of the medicine, and of course the facilitators, the ancient technologies, we have to understand that we live in a world that most of us, basically like anyone that's pretty much listening to this podcast, even us that live in Costa Rica, we are Westerners. We did not grow up in the jungle. We grew up in the West, where we have the psychological clinical structures with the DSM, with the work stressors. We have a lot to unlearn from our bodies, from our psyche. And we have to take into account that, yeah, while in the jungle, of course they don't need integration therapists because their whole community is an integration support system, right? They sit in council every night and drink together and dance together all night long with the children. They do combo, they do hape, this is their integration journey. This is their life. Whereas for us, these experiences, these retreats, going to the church in Florida, they're like isolated from our regular day-to-day environment, and people need to understand that. And that's why integration is really the on-set bridge and the off-set bridge. Okay, this is kind of how I see it. And we have to give respect to, again, that basically like the integration is compensates for again, the lack of ecosystem that can make this whole peak experience a very healthy space where that can just like land in our world without completely distorting it. So yeah, I think that's just really important to understand, is just looking at integration as a system that doesn't come in, a session before your ceremony or it ends a session after. It's a path that's meant to really help you embody the wisdom, embody the insights. And an integration therapist, okay, going back to that, oftentimes, yeah, we may get repressed, like really stark repressed trauma memories just like show up, right? Memories of sexual abuse, memories of things that happen in the family. That is one way how trauma can be revealed. And one thing that I've seen over the years, and also something that has been really true for me, a lot of the relational trauma that I spoke about earlier, about, this insidious enmeshment or emotional neglect that that really impacts a child, even if they grew up in a normative family, with two working parents and, had a home, had shelter, like went to school, like everything normal, quote unquote. But again, as far as like how the parents modeled well-being to the child, or how more specifically how they did not. And then basically the way that a person behaves, right? And this is where we step more into the realm of how the unconscious maybe doesn't show up through like a psychological vision, but more of as a behavior. Okay, so how a person behaves, whether in the ceremony, or like, again, in the aftermath, in relationship with other people, projecting a lot of deep relational dynamics, toxic behaviors, toxic patterns. All these things show up between an integration facilitator to the person. So in that sense, it becomes a relational therapeutic container. And of course, it's psychedelically informed because we're psychedelic people. But there's a lot of trauma and healing work that can be done with a trauma-informed integration therapist. And again, it all shows up through the behavior between the client and the coach or the therapist. And that's a whole other layer of trauma work in the psychedelic space that I don't think a lot of people talk about at all.
Absolutely. What is trauma
What's
informed?
that?
Can you tell people what trauma informed is?
Well, yes.
Let
So,
people know. What is
I mean,
trauma
trauma
informed?
informed is basically like if you look at any type of profession, right? So let's say that yes, there are
Hmm.
integration coaches. What are integration coaches? People that maybe have been trained in psychedelic support. They were trained in set setting and skill set. They were trained in dosing. Maybe they were even trained in facilitation. But it doesn't necessarily mean that they have the relational training, again, the relational dynamic training that I was talking about earlier, where we can see relational dynamics such as projection, transference, countertransference. These are these are psychological dynamics that people study mostly in psychology school, right, when they become therapists.
Hmm. Right.
And and then of course, so there's that, and then there's the trauma informed is a whole other skill set of understanding what trauma is, how it manifests in a person's body, psyche, spirit, and life, and then having very specific interventions to support that, right? And we have to also be careful because up until now, being trauma informed usually meant that you have to be a licensed clinician to be able to treat trauma. And that is, by the way, still the case. To treat anyone, you have to be a licensed medical professional. But you can be an integration coach that didn't go to psychology school, but hopefully in their training, it was trauma informed. They talked about trauma, what trauma is, how it manifests, and what are interventions to support that. So the integration coach or facilitator can support the trauma if and when it shows up. So it's basically a professional skill set that supports people who have trauma. And to be very honest, Mark, I cannot for the life of me right now imagine that there could be any type of like highly skilled integration or psychedelic support person that is not trauma informed. We can't afford to have that. It's like a part of the deal.
It really is. And like, let's get real here and let's talk really how can do you think this could ever work in the Western world? Like this whole structure of you have a clinical psychologist, then you have a psychedelic integration coach, and they're both working together with this one patient. I don't like to even use that term, but this one human to get them in a better place in life. Do you think you could ever see that working without it being underground? Do you? Do we really see this working? Or is it always going to be just like it is right now on the surface? I mean, because our world's broken. And like every day we see how many people are reaching out, how many people, like the internet's there. People see there's other ways to heal out there. We're a broken society. We're a broken culture. I come down here and I see like it's just so baffling to me how these families are so, you know, I'm going to babble a little bit here, but these families down here in Costa Rica or in South America, wherever I am, I've never seen a kid really yell or scream or go out of control. Maybe it does happen, but I don't see it, and I see these broken little societies we have, especially in America. So I wonder, you know, because I think everybody like knows about psychedelics and knows about the wonders and the blissful and just the true healing powers of these medicines if you navigate this in a right way. But do you ever see it really working, or do you think it's always going to be this underground sort of thing?
No, of course I see it working. I mean, it's working now. I mean, definitely we still have a lot to navigate and reimagine because we are literally reimagining a new what the way that I've seen it over the years. When I started the integration circles in Los Angeles back in 2016, as far as I was concerned, we were literally building a grassroots community health support system because there were tons of people sitting with medicines in Los Angeles, whether the government agreed with it or not. Research shows that millions of people use psychedelics, and these numbers keep growing every year. And these people do
Hmm.
not have their psychological, emotional, physical health needs met where they're at. We do understand the harm reduction system to support people who are addicted um, to cocaine or to heroin. That is in place,
Okay.
right? But at the
Hmm.
same time, people that use psychedelics are completely disregarded in that respect. And of course, these are two different classes of medicines. It's totally apples and oranges.
Absolutely. For
However,
sure. For sure.
we
Hmm.
need to remember that this is
But we classify them the same though. That's the scary part. We put them in the same group, which is
The
really
government does. Yes, the
mind-boggling to me.
government does. That is
Yeah, the
correct.
government.
The U.S. government.
Yeah, we put them in the same classification when they're merely they don't even mirror each other. They are apples and oranges. So they will show you that cocaine is not good for you. Psychedelics will show you that that path is not good for you. It's just it's really bothersome sometimes to us that I wish more and more people would dive into this and understand it more. I think we do have to leave our government out of this right now because I think our government in general is not for us or not for, especially in America. And I don't think any government, I don't think they're for this healing property or this healing power and these healing capabilities of psychedelics. So,
I think
yeah,
so.
I
Just
guess my
if I can
question,
answer your
go
question
ahead.
from earlier, from I hear
Sure.
and I know that we have this opinion. A lot of people that are kind of have been fed up and disappointed and let down by the conventional social health systems in the United States and in other advanced quote unquote countries of the world, more modern countries. And there is definitely a huge rebellion right now against that, especially with people who are stepping into the psychedelic and plant medicine world for the first time. My
Right.
opinion is that yes, has the system failed us? Sure. Do we need to completely throw the baby out with the bathwater? No, we still need to understand that there are very specific techniques, intervention systems that, again, because we live and grew up in the West, we're children of the West. We're not children of the jungle. So we still need and can utilize a lot of the knowledge that has been synthesized over the last century, right? Science has its
Hmm.
place. Medical systems do have their place. There is a reason why people,
For sure.
sit for licensure when they become therapists for 3,000 hours of frontal client care, because in that way, this is how you can really understand and embody relational dynamics. There's ethical care that we need to take into consideration, right? So, we really, my approach is more about, okay, let's study the rules of this game to see how it works, and let's take the good rules and employ them and then rig the system and build a whole new game. But I don't believe in completely disregarding or throwing out what has been built in the last century. I think it's on the opposite spectrum. It's combining, learning how to combine the best of both worlds, synthesize the best of both worlds. And to answer your question, can a clinician and a integration person work together? Absolutely. I do this all, this is something that I do. I did study psychology, by the way, but I never became clinically licensed because for personal reasons, I wanted to have more freedom in the field, to experiment more with the underground so I can build something new, right? But that was my personal choice.
Hmm.
However, a lot of my clients, they're, yes, they have suicidal ideations, they work with psychiatrists, they have medications, and we worked together with all of that. And one thing I teach my students as well, even though my program is absolutely trauma informed, I always advocate for, if you have, first of all, you have to decide and understand if you're ready to work with people that have PTSD. And in case that you do choose that, then I would highly recommend to make sure that they also are working with a clinician tandem, a clinician that is aware of their psychedelic adventures and that can help provide that very specific clinical support when needed. So yes, it's all about working with teams. It's a multidisciplinary approach that we're looking at right now in psychedelic support. Okay, it's I bring in the nutritionist, I bring in the breathwork person. There's the shaman, there's the fitness coach. It's an all-in modality, right? And we don't need to
That is beautiful.
aim to basically like be the one-stop shop for people that are coming in to heal.
That's a pretty powerful way to do this. I mean, that's the way it should be done, just how you said it. I mean, but you've been doing this for 10, 15 years. You're pretty connected there, so that makes so much sense because you've seen a lot of this stuff happen, and it's really that's the way that we really saw this going in the future. I don't think you could ever just go sit with this medicine, come home on the weekend, and go live your life. It's just not how this works. It just doesn't work that way. You don't take a couple mushrooms and say, okay, nothing happened. you gotta have whole lifestyle changes. You gotta do something. So let's dive into a couple other things. Let's dive into somebody gets off their experience. They come and they book. They sit with you. What does something like that look like when they come to sit? When they come for the integration coaching. When they come and sit with you for integration, and you also do what else? I'm sorry. What did
Yeah,
you
so
just
I
say?
work with my client profile is very diverse. So as mentioned, I work with and I train people who want to be psychedelic support providers. So there's a professional aspect. I teach groups. I hold retreats, and I also see people one on one, providing them consultation to help them strategize what their psychedelic therapy journey could look like. So basically, a client that is interested in healing, for example, their depression, and they want to understand which medicines are best for them, how to take them, when to take them, what are the options. So I help them build a strategy towards that. And then other clients come in and they go through the whole journey with me, including, they come in with an issue that they have, and they heard that psychedelics are right for them. And in that case, I would walk them through the entire journey, help them prepare, create the strategy, facilitate, and of course do the integration work with them. And this is typically a period of about 6 months or so. I'm a full
Hmm.
believer of long-term integration. I already mentioned this. Integration doesn't
Hmm.
happen in one session with your coach after a ceremony. It's got to
Hmm.
be a season. Like, you have to look at it as a season of transformation, and it's all about habit building, unlearning, processing trauma, learning to relate with others, and diving deeper into your goals. And also, we create goals together. We do a midway check of the goals. We create new goals. We work on, okay, what life do they actually want to live, and we work towards that. But one thing that I'm really big on, Mark, is I'm less about the breakthrough peak experience and more about, okay, like, we utilize the psychedelic compounds for sure as needed,
Hmm.
but they're not the main event. Right? So it's more about,
Right.
it's going to be there. We work together week to week with a client, and then suddenly, like, if it seems like there is some type of a story or a block that has like really deep roots that I feel could stand to be reprogrammed. That's when we decide to go into ceremony. We decide exactly which compound to use, and I do work with a variety of different compounds, and I'm really huge on combinations. I love that. That's my forte.
Talk a little. Can you
Sure.
talk a little bit about that? I
So,
don't mind that at all.
so I
Like,
call
let's talk about like a forte of medicine. Let's mixing medicines
exactly. I
together, like
call it.
ayahuasca,
It's just
wachuma.
like a
That's
mixologist that mixes alcohol. I call myself a cosmic mixologist.
okay. Because a lot of people would say that's dangerous, but and even in the beginning, I thought that was a little weird. But now, as I've dove into this path, I see it is not at all.
Wait,
It's
hold on.
very
Is it
widely accepted.
dangerous? It absolutely can be, I mean, but at the same time, aspirin can be dangerous when it is taken and not according to direction. You have
Hmm.
to obviously understand how each medicine works, what are the
Hmm.
contraindications, what are the strengths, what are the weaknesses, and how basically to take the best out of each medicine, to combine them together, and most importantly, combining them with the person and their specific chemistry, their resources, their mind, their brain, and what they're bringing into the room. That's the key. So it's not that, okay, there is a cocktail that is just given to any person. It's about taking the very specific conditions of this human being that comes to me and everything they bring to the table, their history, their mental health, their medical conditions, their pharmaceuticals, their goals, their time capacity. People have children, they have jobs. We want to really, the way that I design the transformational experience for clients is taking into account the total and complete person and the way that they live, and then again integrate the psychedelic transformation into where they're at, stretching them a little bit, but always keeping them at a well level, meaning they're going to wake up the next day. If they need to go to work, they will. If they need to go get their child from school, they will, but they still keep growing. So I'm less about, let's get the breakthrough and then you need to recover for 2 weeks and whatever, and more about, you're going to keep functioning, you're going to keep walking, you're going to embody the psychedelic wisdom as you brush your teeth, as you make breakfast, as you go and meet your friend. It's just like, this is to me what integration is.
Have you seen a very successful way to do that? Have you seen it very successful for people to do it this way?
Yeah, I have a very high level of success rate, if I do say so myself. I've noticed recently, Mark, I had this like epiphany, looking at my current client profile, and I was like, wow, I've been noticing how a big part of my work is it seems to be a lot about repairing previous experiences that people have had with other facilitators, or even ketamine clinics. Like I can't even tell you how many clients that I've worked with that went through the ketamine clinic protocol in the States and even in other countries, like
Mhm.
very high level clinics, New York, Los Angeles, and went through the protocol. And either it didn't do anything for them, or the results were completely lost as soon as they stepped out of the clinic, or like 2 weeks after, right? There was nothing was sustained, or on the other side of it, maybe they were re-traumatized trying to heal through these clinics, because these clinics and some facilitators, because they're not relationally informed, trauma informed, psychedelically informed, integration informed, they don't provide the proper context in which these medicines can excel and thrive and sustain the results. So, I work with ketamine. I've had incredible success with ketamine. Again, clients that have tried multiple clinics and nothing worked for them, and now they're living their best life. And I have my own protocols and my own support system that I created over the years, and my clients will say it works. How about that?
Yeah, I just I like different options. I think people are really searching. People are really searching to get out of their traumas, and I think different options in different ways. I'm a firm believer is do whatever makes you happy. Do whatever is going to bring you joy, because if you don't, it's never going to happen. You know, I love what you're doing. I think different options can be possible. I don't I never, especially in this space, I was really scared of all these medicines in the beginning. I was like, oh, I'm never going to do that. Never going to do that. Aboga. Oh my God. I've sat with every one of these medicines except Yopo. So I don't, there's nothing to me, there's a beauty in these medicines. And I think sometimes I'll tear up. But what you say is like, I think after that 2 or 3 week, we forget. And I think that's what the most important part about integration is that unforgetting, And because when we forget is when we lose ourselves again, So when we don't forget, because we're all going to forget, I mean, I'll just speak for myself. I can't say we all are, but for that first 2 or 3 weeks after an experience is beautiful, but we do forget. And if we don't keep doing good things, we're going to lose it. I mean, we're just going to lose what I've never had, like, I've had one, like, I've sat with ayahuasca maybe 40, 50 times. I've only had really one huge breakthrough. All the other ones were really great learning experiences. They're feelings, and I know something's happening. And, when I get off those experiences, I do. I go through that 2 week hiatus. I don't know what it is, but it's a revamping of whatever it is. So I think it's just so, so important to like integrate all this, find a coach like yourself, or find somebody, find the community, just to go out there blind and continue to do what you're doing and jump on these experiences. It's just an experience. That's all it is then. Because these are life-changing medicines. They really are.
Yeah, thank you. And I think a big part of maybe the grief that you're experiencing now, Mark, which I think is like, I think you're providing a voice to a lot of people that feel the same, is okay, these 2 weeks afterwards where the neuroplasticity levels in the brain are so high, and this is such a great opportunity to restyle yourself, right, according to the new codes that you received in ceremony. But then, one of the biggest pieces in what some people call the psychedelic movement or the psychedelic renaissance right now, that I'm working to reframe, is the lack of education and understanding in facilitators, and again, in churches and in retreat centers and guides about what happens in the integration process. And really, a lot of them, again, they can be like the best medicine facilitators, hold impeccable space, super trustworthy, right? Clean energy, And at the same time, as soon as the ceremony is done, they just kind of like dump the client because they don't understand, again, the importance of the relational aspect and how detrimental it is for the person's wellness with any experience, really, because life is all about relationships, and then the clients end up getting re-traumatized. So I'm really working not just by myself, but also with an organization that I work with, Nectara, where I'm the director of integration for them, and we're literally trying to reframe again the narrative in psychedelic spaces and help them understand basically everything that I shared today. That integration is a harm reduction ecosystem. It has to include the aspect of community. At the end of the day, people, if we take every single person that's ever sat in medicine, right, and actually really even every single person in the world, I'm gonna go as far as that, and this is gonna be maybe an extreme statement for some people, but as far as I see it right now, the wounding of our time right now, collectively on the planet, is that people are so lonely, they're so stuck in the illusion of separation, and they're looking to belong again. Why? Because every single human on the planet, as soon as they left their mother's womb, was separated from unity, from consciousness, from unity consciousness. Separation. And this is where the wounding begins. This is basically the
Think if you were a male and I'll throw a male on there and they circumcise you, then your sexual trauma starts. So then you got males that sexual trauma starts so early at a young age, and then you're separated from your mother. And men don't have childhood traumas. It's the biggest childhood trauma.
Yeah, and of course there are aspects like that of like, rituals that we have in the collective and communities. And anyhow, I really feel like
Hmm.
what I'm trying to say is that ultimately all of us are looking to belong, right? We want to feel that sense of belonging and returning. And
Of
that
course.
aspect of community, of relational wellness, that's really where this is the ultimate lesson of the medicine, right? Everyone will say it's all love, we're all one. What does that mean, we're all one? We all want to be returned to the singular non-dual experience. And if I just have to, like, again, extract the essence of everything that we're doing, that's what it's about. So yes, find your community, find your people. So your community could be, again, people that you sat in ceremony with. If you Google on Meetup,
Hmm.
psychedelic integration circle, no matter where you are, probably almost in the world, you will find your people. Okay.
Hmm.
Google psychedelic
Absolutely.
society, insert your town's name. Of course, there are many online offerings now. And of course, if you want to go deeper in your integration process and really make a change, like real acute change in your life that not only you feel, but other people can see, as far as like the new person that you've become, the way that you present yourself, what you're able to create, the way that you're able to transmute and manipulate time and space to really make a huge difference in the world, that's through integration therapy and coaching. I really do feel that that aspect literally collapses the linear time aspect of psychedelic healing. So basically, you're gonna regenerate yourself, reinvent yourself much quicker with a lot less suffering and like with much more powerful tools. And yeah, just step into your new daily life. Like, I want to say the word warrior, but I don't fully believe in that. Just the new embodied wisdom that you want to be, right? Whatever avatar you see yourself becoming, right? Integration therapy. This is what I see.
I love it. I love it
Yeah.
so much. Well, thank you for a great
Thank you.
conversation today. Why don't you just tell people where we can find you at?
So you can find me on a number of websites. So first of all, the psychedsoul.com. Also psychedelicintegrationcoach.com. If you're looking for an integration circle online or other educational classes, you can check out psychedeliaintegration.org. That's a nonprofit I founded in Los Angeles in 2017. And of course, you can reach out to me for private coaching, and I do hold group and private retreats. So if anyone is looking for a safe and deep and transformative journey in a short amount of time, that's what I love to do more than anything, is just have that one-on-one time with
We would
people and help them rise like that. So
Yeah, I love that. We'll definitely be sharing all your links
thank
all
you.
around. I really appreciate what you do. I appreciate your time in this space so much. So it's really powerful, really good stuff. Thank you, Cherie.
Thanks so much, Mark. Pure Vida, everyone.